From his rocky relationship with Vin Diesel, basically forcing him to leave the film series, to his return that left fans surprised and confused. Here's the real reason Dwayne Johnson left and returned to the Fast and Furious franchise. Now, there's no denying that Dwayne's terrible feud with Vin is a big part of why he decided to step away from the Fast franchise. I've got to say that for a movie that's all about family, it really doesn't seem like the same kind of brotherhood and understanding can be seen in the cast members off-camera. That's because many of the recent entries in the Fast franchise have been mixed up in some serious drama. Like I said, much of this was between Vin and Dwayne, causing Johnson to bid farewell to the entire movie series as a whole. That is, until he made a surprise return in Fast 10. So what exactly caused the drama in the first place? Well, a lot of it can be traced back to the production of Fast and Furious 8. It looks like The Rock wasn't a fan of the work ethic of some of his co-workers. And instead of dealing with the matter privately, Dwayne took to Instagram and described his male co-workers with, let's just say, some unpretty words. And just to hammer down the point that he was seriously angry during production, Johnson mentioned that if in any of the scenes it looks like his blood is boiling, it's probably because he was genuinely pissed off at that moment. Now, while Dwayne didn't really name and shame any of his co-workers, it was pretty obvious to everyone that he was talking about Vin here. There were already rumors going around that Diesel was too protective of the franchise, and that he wasn't letting Johnson come in and try something new with it. This led to some serious friction between the two. If you know anything about Dwayne, it's that he's a very dominating sort of guy. He loves to have creative control over the projects that he's working on. This characteristic of his is clear as day during his short-lived time within the DCEU too. Johnson tried to pull the strings behind the scenes, even despite his Black Adam film being a total bomb at the box office. And eventually, Warner Brothers gave him the boot when they hired James Gunn to reboot the franchise. So it's no surprise that a guy like him would have some big problems when he wasn't given as much creative control as Vin. Johnson probably came in expecting his ideas to be implemented into the franchise. Vin probably felt like Dwayne was trying to steal his franchise away from him, even though The Rock hasn't been a part of the Fast franchise for nearly as long as Vin. This friction between the two was felt by many of the cast members, and the situation behind the scenes at Fast and Furious 8 sounds downright terrible by all accounts. You even had stars like Scott Eastwood mentioning how his co-stars took forever to get out of their trailers, likely because they were dealing with a whole slew of drama on top of their regular duties as actors. At this point, the writing was on the wall. Everyone behind the scenes, and even the fans, knew that the beef between Diesel and Dwayne had reached a boiling point. And the outcome of all this was that Johnson decided to step away from the Fast and Furious films. This is why, after the 2017 film, The Fate of the Furious, The Rock wasn't present in 2021's Fast and Furious 9. Johnson decided he just didn't want to deal with all the same troubles he had with Vin in the previous movie. Instead, he cut ties with the franchise and decided to work on his spin-off, Hobbs and Shaw. While talking to Rolling Stone in 2018, Dwayne talked about how his feud with Diesel had partially been squashed. So it's not like the fight was the only thing holding him back from joining the Fast franchise. There was also the fact that he was busy working on Hobbs and Shaw around the same time Fast 9 was in production. Since Johnson had a lot of creative control over that project, it makes sense why he was more dedicated to it, more than Fast and Furious. The star mentioned that he was busy investing all his energy into this project, trying to make it as good as it could be. Interestingly enough, Johnson first mentioned that despite his problems with Vin, he didn't have any ill wills with the guy, and then later went on to ask the interviewer to omit the "no ill will" part of his statement. So the guy definitely harbored a bit of resentment for Diesel, even though he claimed that much of their beef had been squashed. But hey, that's just what happens when Johnson doesn't get to control a project the way he wants to. The guy's fiercely passionate, and it's almost to a fault. Instead of working with Vin, he straight up decided he'd make his own spin-off with Jason Statham. Now, for a while, it was looking like that was it for Dwayne and his time with the Fast franchise. That was until Fast 10 was being made, and Vin really looked like he wanted to put his past behind him. He made an Instagram post where he openly asked Johnson to return to the franchise. The star mentioned that his children still call The Rock Uncle Dwayne, sending him well wishes every holiday. And that's not all. Vin even referred to the late Paul Walker, talking about how he wanted to fulfill his promise to Pablo. Despite Diesel pretty much begging Johnson to return, The Rock mentioned at the time that there was no chance that he'd come back. While talking to CNN, the star mentioned that he was pretty firm on the matter, And while he was supportive of the cast and crew, he wasn't happy with how Vin basically tried to manipulate him with the post. Apparently, Johnson wasn't a fan of Vin using his kids and bringing up Paul Walker's death as a way of convincing The Rock. As far as Johnson was concerned, they already talked about the matter months ago, and there was nothing else to say. And if all of that wasn't enough, Johnson further added that while he wishes the cast well as they head on to the final part of the franchise, he simply isn't going to partake in the muddied conversation surrounding it. After all that, his return to the franchise felt impossible. Well, that is, until he appeared in the mid-credits scene of Fast 10. Yeah, after all that drama and constant mentions by Dwayne that there was no way he was going to join the franchise again, he somehow decided to put the beef behind him and return again. Johnson reprised his role as Luke Hobbs in the scene, which made it seem like Hobbs was going to appear as a major character in the Fast 11 film. Considering it's set to be the final part of the Fast and Furious franchise, it makes sense why the character is back for one final rodeo. It's possible that all the recent drama that Johnson and Vin were doing was really just for show. They might have squashed their beef a long time ago and only waited until the movie came out so that the surprise wasn't ruined. Because let's be real, the reveal of Hobbs being in Fast 10 was a genuine surprise that caught many fans off guard. It really didn't feel like there was any chance of Johnson being in the movie. I mean, he said as much. Though it's possible that Johnson still isn't on the best of terms with Dwayne and simply agreed to appear in the movie because they gave him a huge sum of money, but I don't know, anything is possible. But the most likely answer is probably a bit more complex. It turns out that despite the hyped-up return of Dwayne Johnson, he still might not appear in Fast 11 after all. That's because, on June 1st, 2023, it was announced that Johnson is set to star in a new Fast and Furious project. While the title of this project still hasn't been revealed, it's seemingly going to take place between Fast 10 and Fast and Furious 11. It was also confirmed that this film isn't going to be Hobbs and Shaw 2 as some fans had speculated. Instead, it's going to be a whole different thing. The idea is that it's going to serve as a bridge connecting Fast 10 and Fast 11. This also falls in line with Vin mentioning that Fast 10 was initially planned as a trilogy. Maybe this bridge movie will help catch audiences up with Hobbs, giving his character a proper climax, before the gang officially gears up for the finale in Fast 11. It'd help to give a solid conclusion to one of the series' main characters without it being too shoehorned in. Plus, this bridge movie could also mean that Johnson will have a lot more creative control over the project, with Vin working on Fast 11 instead. And so, the two will likely avoid butting heads all over again. It's still unclear how things will pan out. I can't help but wonder if the beef was really squashed or if they still secretly hate each other. Who knows? But that's the real reason why Johnson left and returned to the Fast and Furious franchise.